My name is Michael, though most people call me Mike. It was a sweltering July night, the kind where the humidity clings to you like a second skin. I was tossing and turning, battling a bout of insomnia, when the phone rang. The harsh jangle sliced through the silence, making my heart leap into my throat. I fumbled for the receiver, half asleep, and mumbled a gruff, "Hello, Mike? Is that you, Mike?" The voice was a whisper, trembling and choked with sobs. It was Sarah, my wife. Or at least it sounded like her. The catch in her voice, the way she always said my name. It was unmistakable. But Sarah was dead. A year ago, a horrific car accident had claimed her and another man, a supposed business associate, according to the police report. A lie I now suspected. A lie I'd reluctantly accepted. A lie that had allowed me to function, to get through each agonizing day. Sarah? Is that really you? Where are you? What's wrong? My voice was hoarse, my mind reeling. This couldn't be happening. Grief, raw and visceral, clawed at my throat. I'd spent the last year trying to piece my life back together, a life shattered into a million fragments. Each morning, I'd wake with a jolt, the phantom weight of her arm across my chest, the lingering scent of her lavender shampoo clinging to the pillows. Then the crushing wave of reality would hit. She was gone. Just a memory, a ghost that haunted the empty spaces of our apartment. I tried dating, a few awkward, stilted dinners, but it felt like a betrayal, a desecration of what we had. No one could ever replace Sarah. She was different. I remember the first time I saw her. It was a rainy November night at a small jazz club downtown. I was there alone, nursing a beer and trying to drown my sorrows in the melancholic saxophone melodies. She was sitting at the bar, a splash of vibrant color in a sea of muted grays. A crimson dress, a cascade of auburn hair, and a smile that could melt glaciers. She was laughing at something the bartender had said, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I was captivated. I'd never seen anyone so radiant, so full of life. I'd worked up the courage to talk to her, a nervous, stammering mess. She'd found my awkwardness charming, apparently. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. Felt like I'd known her forever. We'd been inseparable ever since. 2 years later, we were married. A small ceremony by the river, the same river. "Mike, please, you have to help me," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. "They're after me. I'm scared." "Who's after you, Sarah? Where are you?" I demanded, my heart pounding against my ribs. The static on the line crackled, obscuring her response. All I could make out were snippets of words. "River. They saw. Help me, Mike. Sarah, talk to me. Tell me what's happening." I shouted into the phone, my voice rising in panic. "Who are they? What did they see?" I can't explain," she whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Just, please, Mike, come to the river. The old boathouse. Midnight." "The boathouse? Sarah, that's where..." My voice trailed off, the memory of that horrific night flooding back. The screech of tires, the shattering glass, the sickening thud, the police report, the cold, clinical language that described the scene, the 2 bodies pulled from the wreckage. I'd visited the site a few times, a morbid pilgrimage to the place where my world had ended. "I know, Mike," she said, her voice barely a breath. "Please, just trust me." Then the line went dead. Just like that, I stared at the phone in my hand, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and dread. I tried calling back, but the number was disconnected. I checked the caller ID, no number displayed. A ghost call. That's what it had to be. A cruel, twisted prank. But the voice, it was Sarah. I knew it. The way she said my name, the little catch in her voice when she was nervous. It was her. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, replaying the call in my head, searching for some logical explanation. There wasn't one. The sun rose, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, but the darkness inside me remained. I felt a chill, a premonition of something terrible to come. Something connected to the river, the same river that had claimed Sarah's life. The river where we'd exchanged our vows. The river that now seemed to whisper secrets in the dead of night. A river that held the key to a mystery that was slowly unraveling my sanity. The morning after the call, I went through the motions of my day like a zombie. I'm a software engineer, a man of logic and reason. But the night's events defied logic. I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was alive, somewhere out there, in danger. It was irrational, I knew, but I couldn't help it. My colleagues noticed my distracted state. "You all right, Mike?" Tom, my team lead, asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "You seem a bit off." "Just tired," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Didn't sleep well." "Rough night." He chuckled, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. "Tell you what, let's grab some lunch later." My treat. I forced a smile and nodded, grateful for his concern, yet desperate to escape the forced normalcy of the office. Every line of code I wrote felt meaningless, every conversation a distraction. My mind kept drifting back to Sarah, to the call, to the river. When I got home that evening, I found something that made my blood run cold. On the bedside table, nestled amongst Sarah's old jewelry box and a framed photo of us, were our wedding rings. They were wet, as if they'd just been pulled from water. From the river, the same river where Sarah had died. I picked up the rings, my fingers trembling. The cold metal felt alien in my hand. How could they be wet? They'd been in that box for a year, untouched. I distinctly remember placing them there after the funeral. I'd even considered throwing them into the river myself, a symbolic gesture of letting go, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The thought of losing that last tangible connection to her was too much to bear. Now here they were, wet as if mocking me, as if they'd swum up from the depths of the river, carrying a message I couldn't decipher. I searched the apartment, looking for any sign of forced entry, anything that could explain the rings. But there was nothing. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. The only thing out of place was the lingering scent of her perfume, a faint floral fragrance I hadn't smelled since she died. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. It clung to the air like a memory, teasing me with its presence. The combination of the call, the wet rings, and the perfume was too much to dismiss as coincidence. Someone was playing a cruel game with me, a game that preyed on my grief and my memories of Sarah. But who, and why? Was I losing my mind? Was the grief finally taking its toll, manifesting in these bizarre, inexplicable events? I decided I needed help. I couldn't handle this on my own. I needed someone who could look at the situation objectively, someone who could find the answers I couldn't. But first, I needed to know if I was imagining things. The next day, I made an appointment with Dr. Emily Carter, the psychologist I'd been seeing on and off since Sarah's death. I told her about the call, the rings, the perfume. I described the overwhelming sense of dread that had consumed me, the feeling that I was losing my grip on reality. Dr. Carter listened patiently, her expression sympathetic. "Mike," she said gently, "I understand that you're going through a very difficult time. Losing Sarah was a traumatic experience, and it's natural to have these kinds of feelings. But these aren't just feelings, doctor," I insisted. "This is real." I heard her voice. I saw the rings. I smelled her perfume. "I'm not making this up." "I'm not saying you are, Mike," she replied. "But grief can manifest in strange ways. Sometimes we can experience things that seem very real, but are actually projections of our subconscious. It's possible that your mind is trying to make sense of Sarah's death, creating these hallucinations as a way to cope." "So, you think I'm crazy?" I asked, my voice laced with frustration. "No, Mike, I don't think you're crazy," she said firmly. "I think you're grieving, and sometimes grief can play tricks on us. We can talk more about this, explore these feelings if you'd like." "I appreciate that, doctor," I said, "but I need answers. I need to know if what I'm experiencing is real, or if I'm just losing it." Dr. Carter hesitated. "Mike," she said softly, "I'm a psychologist, not a detective. I can help you process your emotions, but I can't investigate these events. Perhaps you should consider talking to someone who can." Her words were a confirmation of my deepest fears. She couldn't explain what was happening. She validated my sanity, but offered no solutions. I left her office feeling more confused and lost than ever. I knew what I had to do. I needed a professional, someone who dealt with the tangible, not the intangible. I needed a private investigator, someone who could find the truth, even if it was a truth I didn't want to face. I found a detective agency online and scheduled a meeting for the next day. The detective I met, a grizzled man named Jack Rourke, looked like he'd stepped straight out of a noir film. He had a world-weary look in his eyes and a voice that sounded like gravel gargling with whiskey. He listened to my story with an impassive expression, occasionally nodding and taking notes. I told him about the call, the rings, the perfume, everything. I even told him about the police report the business associate Sarah was with when she died. Jack didn't comment on anything, just listened and watched me with those piercing eyes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Mr. Evans, you've come to the right place. This is definitely unusual. I've seen a lot of strange things in my time, but this is something else." Jack explained his fees and his methods. He was thorough and professional, but there was something about him that made me uneasy. Maybe it was his past, which he was very tight-lipped about. Or maybe it was just my own paranoia, fueled by the strange events of the past few days. I hired him anyway. I was desperate for answers, and Jack was my only hope. He told me to stay put and not to try to investigate on my own. He said he'd be in touch with any leads. The next few days were agonizing. I waited for Jack's call, my anxiety growing with each passing hour. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting back to Sarah, to the call, to the river. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Jack called. His voice was grim. "Mr. Evans, I found some things. Things you're not going to like." He told me to meet him at his office. When I arrived, he had a file waiting for me. Inside were photos, documents, and police reports. They painted a picture of Sarah I never knew existed. Turned out that Sarah wasn't who I thought she was. Before we met, she had a past. A dark past. She was a prostitute in Chicago, working under the name Lily. She wasn't just any prostitute, though. She was running the whole operation. She had a network of girls working for her, providing various services. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was reading. My Sarah, the woman I loved, the mother of my children. She was a pimp? It was too much to comprehend. The photos, they were explicit, degrading. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could I have been so blind? How could I not have seen the truth? Jack watched me, his expression unreadable. "I know this is a lot to take in, Mr. Evans," he said, his voice low. "But there's more." He went on. He explained that Sarah had tried to leave her past behind when we met. She'd cleaned up her act, started a new life, but her past had come back to haunt her. Apparently, she'd made some enemies in Chicago, powerful people who weren't happy with her leaving. People she owed, people she'd crossed. She thought she could just walk away, Jack said, shaking his head. But it doesn't work like that in that world. They don't let you go that easily. The night of the accident, she'd received a call from one of her old associates, a man named Sal DeMarco. He was her handler back in Chicago, a ruthless, intimidating figure. He'd threatened her, told her they knew about her new life, her marriage, her family. They wanted her back. Not necessarily back in the business, but they needed her for one last job. DeMarco had a client, Jack explained. A very influential man, a regular from her Lily days. A man she couldn't refuse. He was powerful, connected. And DeMarco made it clear this was the only way she could protect her new life, ensure her past remained buried. One last job and then she'd be free. So, she went back? I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. She did what she thought she had to do, Jack replied. She met with this client. That's when the accident happened. But the police report, the business associate. A cover-up, Jack said bluntly. DeMarco has connections. He made sure the police report was sanitized. They wanted to avoid a scandal. It wouldn't do for a prominent businessman to be linked to a high-class call girl, especially one with a history like Sarah's. So, she was forced? I asked, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. She was between a rock and a hard place, Mr. Evans, Jack said. She made a choice, a desperate choice. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture was still blurry. Why the call? Why the wet rings? Why now? Why bring all this up again after a year? There's one more thing, Jack said, his voice grave. DeMarco believes Sarah stole something from him. Something valuable. Something he desperately wants back. He thinks she gave it to you, or at least that you know where it is. Me? But I don't know anything about. That's what you say, Jack interrupted. But DeMarco isn't convinced. He thinks you're hiding something. That's why he's playing these games with you, trying to scare you, trying to get you to lead him to it. The call, the rings, the perfume. It all made sense now. It wasn't Sarah reaching out to me. It was DeMarco using her voice, her scent, to manipulate me, to make me believe she was alive, to draw me into his web. He's been watching you, Mr. Evans, Jack said. He knows your routine, your habits. He's been waiting for the right moment to make his move. But what is it that he thinks I have? I asked, my mind racing. What could Sarah have stolen that's so valuable? We don't know yet, Jack admitted. But we're going to find out. Because if we don't, you're in serious danger, Mr. Evans. DeMarco isn't a man you want to cross. The revelation of Sarah's past hit me like a physical blow. It was more than just a betrayal. It was a complete shattering of my reality. The woman I loved, the woman I'd built my life with, was a stranger. Phantom. Lily, the high-class call girl, was a world away from Sarah, my wife. Yet they were the same person. The cognitive dissonance was excruciating. I felt like I was living in a distorted mirror image of my life, where everything looked familiar, yet everything was fundamentally different. I couldn't reconcile the image of Sarah, the gentle, loving woman I knew, with the photos Jack had shown me. The explicit, degrading images of Lily. It felt like a violation not just of her memory, but of my own sense of self. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? Were there signs? Or was I simply so in love, so willing to believe in the fairy tale we'd created, that I'd ignored anything that didn't fit the narrative? Mr. Evans, Jack said, his voice cutting through my thoughts. I know this is difficult, but we need to focus. DeMarco isn't going to wait. We need to find out what he's looking for. What's the point? I mumbled, my voice hollow. What does it matter anymore? It matters because you're in danger, Jack replied sharply. DeMarco thinks you know something. Whether you do or not is irrelevant. He believes you do, and that's enough to put you in his crosshairs. And Sarah? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Did she ever talk about this? Jack hesitated. No, he said finally. She never mentioned anything about her past. She was very good at keeping her two lives separate. So, she lied to me? I said, the words heavy with bitterness. For our entire marriage, she lied to me. She made a choice, Mr. Evans, Jack said. A desperate choice. She wanted to protect you. To protect her new life. Protect me, I scoffed. By lying to me? By living a double life? She put me in more danger than I could ever have imagined. She was trying to escape, Jack said. To leave that life behind. She thought she could. She was wrong. I thought about Sarah, about the woman I thought I knew. Had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just a convenient escape route? A way to leave her past behind? The questions swirled in my mind, each one a fresh stab of pain. If she'd told me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. If she'd just been honest with me, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe, Jack replied, but we'll never know. What we do know is that DeMarco is looking for something. Something Sarah stole from him. And he thinks you know where it is. But I don't, I insisted. I swear, I don't know anything about it. Then we need to find out what it is, Jack said. We need to figure out what Sarah took, and where she hid it. Because if we don't, DeMarco is going to keep coming after you. And he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. He pulled out a map of Chicago, spreading it across the table. "We need to go back," he said. "We need to retrace Sarah's steps. We need to talk to her old associates. Someone knows something. Someone knows what she stole." "I can't go back there," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't face those people. That world." "You don't have a choice, Mr. Evans," Jack said, his gaze unwavering. "It's either face them or keep running. And sooner or later, DeMarco will catch up to you. Which do you choose?" I stared at the map, at the names and addresses Jack had marked. Places Sarah had frequented, people she'd known. It was like looking into a dark abyss, a world I never knew existed, a world my wife had inhabited, a world that was now threatening to consume me. "All right," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper. "Let's go." I knew I was walking into a nightmare, but I also knew that I couldn't run anymore. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. I had to find out what Sarah had stolen, not just to protect myself, but to understand her, to understand the woman I loved, the woman who was now a mystery to me, a mystery I was determined to solve, even if it destroyed me in the process. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.